Hello there everyone and welcome back. It's time for more of my, grind to legendary rank with the Imperial Navy, and this time around I'm just going to spoil it for you a little bit. We're going to be face off against nothing but Space Marines. Don't ask me how this happened. I tried doing all my matches like several hours apart from each other to at least try to avoid, or not avoid, but rather get more diverse type of matchups. And in all honesty, that's what I try and do a lot of the times with my recordings as well. Try and space them a tiny bit, where it's by 5-10 minutes, a couple of hours depending on when I'm doing the recording. I really try to do that just for, like I said, to spread it out a bit. But in this case, we're dealing with, I want to say it's a newer opponent because they don't quite have their Admiral level 10 skills, but they seem to know what they're doing at the very least. It's just going to be an interesting matchup because I am going to be dealing with an all Vanguard type of fleet here. And way back on launch of Armada 2, Space Marine Vanguard fleets were probably the most powerful of the light cruiser fleets at the very least in the game, so much so that they may have been the reason why the light cruisers have been nerfed as much as they did, with the objectives being reduced in capture speed, and of course only having 2 charges to the boarding and utility. Their abilities basically. And this is of course the realization of Vanguards here. Never mind the fact that I had no contacts, we even see the ships launching fighters. And in all honesty, I'm not really worried about this fleet, just because I have battleships, I have battle cruisers, and their capture speed progress should be substantial. One battle cruiser should even be able to capture objectives faster than their 6 Vanguard ships altogether. Maybe 7, I can't quite recall how many ships we're dealing with here. But I'm not worried at all. The main factor that I'm trying to consider before I do something like that is to just outlast or wear down their offensive capabilities. Like I said, they only have 2 charges of fighters, so I'm planning on sniping these down as quickly as I can. So much so that I think I'm just going to commit to letting my fighters fight to the bitter end, as opposed to preserving the charge. Because once their fighters are down, then I should have a much easier time, that those fighters should almost never get shot down. And so far with the brace for impact, it's working incredibly well. We do, however, have boarding torpedoes coming in, and with the awkward angle, my battleship is going to have a difficult time trying to get in close, or at least trying to avoid all of them. But thankfully, that's part of the reason why I have a stasis bomb. Maybe it wasn't planned this way, but it's nice in this circumstance. I slow down almost all of them, sadly take a bit of hits from the right side torpedoes, so I commit to call to arms, and so much so that I'm even going to transfer the crew from my other ships over to the battleship to wear them down. And hopefully, even though there are still fighters, I should be able to weather the rest of these torpedoes a little bit better, since they're the ones getting shot down. And thankfully, only 1 boarding torpedo managed to connect there, out of what, 4 Vanguards I think, at most. So I feel like that was a good trade for something that only has 2 charges. And it's still going to be in pretty healthy condition too. It's going to be at 10 crew for the first phase. And my battle cruisers are going to be in good position to at least do damage. And thankfully, my opponents just make it easy for me a little bit. With the scanner pulse, with the fighters revealing, sadly I'm not shooting down their boarding parties, but I'm going to prioritize the deck. And that basically just negates their solid running, if I'm fortunate enough to get the critical hit on the deck. Although that's easier said than done, where I'm also using my brace for impact stance to kind of shoot down their boarding, and the torpedoes at that. And with them concealed, I am going to be playing a slight bit of cat and mouse. But right now, it's 2 objectives to their 3. I'm not really concerned, so long as I'm actually doing the damage to them. Since, like I said, the battleship's still in good shape at the moment, more boarding torpedoes are coming their way, and I don't have the convenience this time of call to arms to minimize that damage. But everything else has been negated. The battle cruisers avoided a lot of damage there, I didn't quite put the effort into the battleship as I would have liked, since it still gets hit by a lot of the boring torpedoes. I can't remember. Did I burn his combustion gauge? Yeah, I burnt out his combustion gauge. That's what happened there. That's why I took all those hits that it did. But even then, that's all the boring torpedoes gone. There's only 2 charges of the regular direct fire type of torpedoes, and these bombers and assault boats, which are gaining value against this falchion. So I am going to try and pull it back and keep it alive. And otherwise, no decks have been destroyed, but we did force a brace for impact stance on that one Vanguard, so I am content with leaving that be, maybe focusing on it if there's nothing else to shoot at. And I'm not worried about the frigates. It's like I said, the light cruisers, the frigates have been heavily nerfed, so I can capture an objective so much more faster than them, especially when it's just one of them even. And finally I get the deck destruction on that one cruiser. So it is permanently visible until the repairs are done, and even then they might still have to wait for their stances to come off cooldown. So I'm not worried. This is basically 2 light cruisers that are vulnerable to my shots. It's a matter of crippling everything else and ideally killing them off before this attrition damage does wear me down. Since I still got plenty of crew, but they are just spread out otherwise. One cruiser is about to lose a third of its crew. Another 2 actually are down to 6. So I am taking damage all around. And I think in all this time I did destroy one of the light cruisers down below. So that leaves the other one, a scanner pulse to deal with these 2 in front of us. And I'm hoping to either pin them or do some serious damage to them right now. And thankfully they're going to oblige me a tiny bit. A nice solid hit on the one Vanguard. Sadly I couldn't hit with the other cruiser though. But needless to say, it had full health at the start of that engagement. And with the 3 fire assaults, it may very well just die from that, if not really damn close. And the flagship just lost its deck during all that time, just the random fire did probably the most important type of damage. Although I think it may have used up all its disruption bombs and its stasis bomb, or whatever abilities it had anyway. So the flagship doesn't really do much more use here, since Space Marines don't really have morale anyway. But it's a nice... Personally, as much as I feel like the Vanguard's no longer a useful type of fleet to go with, apparently my opponent does say in the chat in a moment that they have been winning with the Vanguard fleet. I just couldn't tell you what kind of opponents they had to really say if it's a strong fleet composition. Because I honestly did try the Space Marine Vanguard fleet before, when I tried to do a focus, focus a week on Space Marines? And don't get me wrong, they were good matches, I enjoyed them. I just never put them on the YouTube channel because it seemed like I didn't have much of a chance. I played 2 matches. I can't remember what the second one was, but the first match was an Orc all battleship type of fleet. And I did really well disabling 2 of them, but by then they had all the points from being spread out and grabbing the objectives, and I had no charges left to my boarding or my torpedoes. I basically ran out of steam against 3 other battleships. And then it just was a horrible, slow, agonizing defeat, because there wasn't much I could do just because of how slow my Vanguards could capture objectives. But it still felt really nice with how the execution went. It just did not have the longevity. Otherwise, this match is pretty much over now. Even though they have 4 objectives, I still have a healthy point lead, and like I said, the battle cruisers and battleships can very easily grab these objectives. It's just a question of how many Vanguards are actually left. 2 of them basically jumped off. 1 is down below because I saw it earlier, or at least grabbing the point. So, with broadside boarding they maybe can do a little bit more, but not enough to actually kill the ship, I feel like. It's a match It's a fleet I actually enjoy controlling. It's just kind of obsolete. It's kind of past its prime now, sadly. Whether for good or for ill, because I know I indirectly suffered that result with my Necron Shroud fleet. And that's a fleet that basically has only macro weaponry as opposed to torpedoes. Alright, I am doing a rematch with our Space Marine adversary, and mainly because they decide to mix up their fleet. Although it's like I said before, it's been a little bit of time since I did my first match with them, so I wasn't really prepared for a rematch, and this is part of the reason why I try and space it out. Since a lot of my videos, I tend to cut out any rematches I do when I'm facing off against opponents. Let me rephrase that. I basically cut out like multiple matches back to back with the same opponent, but in this case, it's going to be different enough to, I would hope, be an interesting type of match to watch at the very least. But during my time with the Azuyani, I'm pretty certain there was like 20, maybe 25 matches I did that never made it onto YouTube simply because they were rematches or just underwhelming matches in general that I felt wouldn't be worth putting on here. Since if you see me play against the same opponent more than once, you kind of already know what to expect perhaps. But what we're going to be dealing with this time around is the Battle Barge and 3 Strike Cruisers. It's a little more akin to what I'm fielding, although I believe they are using the carrier type of Thunder or Strike Cruisers as opposed to my one with the boarding torpedoes. I'm going to have to double check on that, since I honestly don't recall if there were any frigates or not. And in this case, it's the boarding, or at least the fighter bay type of strike cruiser. So if I'm understanding that right, they don't really have the points to really get a frigate. Or at least they're heavily limited on what kind of frigates they can use, since the carrier type of strike cruisers are so much more expensive to kind of field after all. That doesn't necessarily make them better, for there are ways to easily deal with these fighters and bombers, especially when you consider that the strike cruisers don't have access to torpedoes like the Vanguard did. So in some ways I should have this a little bit easier, at least at range, although I did decide to go with the armor-piercing ammo for this type of matchup, since there wasn't really much other upgrades I could benefit off of, but after it was all said and done, I feel like maybe I should have gone with extended sensors for my frigates. That way, they could spot them at a nice safe distance, and my fleet kind of benefits off it quite nicely. Maybe not at the moment with the brace for impact, since I am dealing with a lot of fighters still, and if those bombers or assault boats start hitting or start connecting, then they're going to cause problems really quickly, especially the assault boats. They're gonna, where we've seen as the Vanguards are not gonna, I'm all over the place today, dang it. But whereas the Vanguards I wasn't really threatened, it seemed like, this is a much more serious threat because of the power that the Battle Barge can even have just for its Honor to Chapter ability and just regular boarding potential in general. And there's the indication of the Battle Barge right there. There's 3 symbols on that fighter squadron. So I know what I'm facing. It's just a little bit of a question of if there's frigates I need to worry about. And I don't believe there was. I could be wrong there. And I wasn't realistically expecting the Novacan to really do anything. I was kind of hoping maybe they would boost and that way I can get vision of them. So this is a nice surprise there. They're not taking the threat of Novacans very seriously, and already the fighter bays are kind of already crippled, and hell, I didn't even realize we destroyed a bombardment cannon right off the bat there. Either way, Stasis Bomb's gonna trap them. They do dodge the plasma bomb, alas, and I'm just realizing now, my opponent kind of hit themselves with the boring torpedoes. Not that it would have been much of an issue about the fighters, either way. And with crippled engine, I don't need to tell you what's going to happen to this one strike cruiser. Although they are game boarding in at the same time, so can't get too complacent. It's still a long ways to go. We only dealt with a little bit of the auxiliary. The battle barge is the big threat right now. And despite my boarding attempts on it, I don't think we're going to even get close to doing anything permanent as far as critical hits with the boarding. I am thankful for destroying the bombardment cannon though. That's the second strike cruiser we just crippled one of their main weaponry. And sadly, my position's a little bit awkward here as I get the cold arms on the flagship. My other cruisers are trying to get a clear shot. And it's not going to connect as well as I like. A couple of fire assaults, but with the convenient repair timing, I do make it up for it with the second torpedo salvo. So right now I'm just keeping an eye on crew complement or the crew damage, because even sure I may have the battleship on cold arms, but so far 2 of my cruisers are really damn close to limping right now, if you're just paying attention to the crew count at the moment. So they've been doing their work, even though damage wise there hasn't been a whole lot to be threatened by just yet. Just a matter of getting another salvo of ramming, another barrage of torpedoes, and at least these 2 ships should be dealt with. And with that said, the fire assaults alone should seal the deal on this flagship. And then there's one strike cruiser left unaccounted for over on the left that is not really joined in this battle, and that's kind of an important factor for how this could have been a lot more closer. 2 of my ships could have been disabled with the amount of time it could have had in this fight. And then otherwise, not much else to say at this point. For some reason I had in my head this was a lot closer just because of how crippled my crew is. And actually it may still look that way, because my flagship just lost 2/3 of its crew. 2 of my cruisers are limping as far as the crew count. And well, with this one fresh strike cruiser, they could do some damage still. Maybe not direct damage, with that said, since I just got boarded heavily there. And those 4 boarding results is probably enough to kill the crew count here on this one ship. Thankfully, my patience paid off a tiny bit on this strike cruiser, but all it really did was burn the repairs. And the idea for Nova Cannon Plasma Bomb was to keep the ship close, so maybe I can hit with some more torpedo salvos. Ideally. And thankfully this is also a dictator, so I got bombers as well to complement this. I just need to realize it's the catch. Otherwise, at this point I'm just crisis managing it. I'm trying to grab objectives and just compound on my lead. The fire assaults are going to do their work there, due to the earlier repair. And that's all she wrote, basically. My opponent's probably going to try warping out again, but at this point, the damage has already been done. I don't even think it's going to survive long enough for the warp out. Nope, never mind. It's just going to commit fighting to the end there, basically. And what I'm looking at now, my ship is pretty fragile at this point, outside the one cruiser up top that's moving to the objective that I kind of forgot about a tiny bit. And sadly I did not get the torpedo salvo I would have loved there either. It should be enough damage with some good broadside weaponry, and that's where I suddenly decide, with all my engines kind of crippled, I just figured, let me just shoot this thing to death. I'm kind of playing into their hand a tiny bit, trying to get in close and try and ram and kill this thing with torpedoes. When my lances and my broadside weaponry are enough to just kill this thing right now. And as a result, it's gonna just burn to death because of that. And like I said, I don't think there were any frigates, so I'm pretty certain that's game. This was at a separate time than the first match, but after the fact, it did feel like it was a lot closer than well, I don't know what I'm trying to say. The crew count could have made the difference there if that final strike cruiser was in the battle earlier. Alright, match number 3 with more Space Marines, but we're going to have a different opponent this time around with Gaduka, is it? And they're going to be doing a kind of unique type of style with Space Marines. I want to say anyway, but a lot of that is incentivized by the point that they have the convenient positional layout. They're going to try and secure the 3 points, and then just kind of kite and turtle against me, trying to wear me out at range, supposedly, if how I'm understanding it. So their fleet composition, interestingly enough, is the Lance Battle Barge, I think 1 strike cruiser, and then the rest are going to be Vanguards, with like 2 frigates maybe to kind of provide vision and allow his lance ships to pummel me down. It's an interesting type of fleet. I honestly couldn't tell you how much I like it though, in all honesty. That I'm a little bit uncertain on at this time. Either way, we're going to be in for a bit of a treat. With that said, they're going to try and circle around me a little bit, or at least feint circling around with the Vanguards. Oh yeah, and I'm remembering this now. The frigates are not solid running. So what looks like to be 4 ships of some kind, these are all frigates. I don't know if my opponent's aware of that mechanic, that I can prioritize components that way, but it does give away that there are more ships around at least. So I'm listening for all ahead full, at least something to give away where the other ships might be. And you'll probably notice it shortly, but they're over on the right. Yep, there they are. The Vanguards give it away. 3 Vanguard ships. I don't know what kind of loaded they have, honestly. I can't quite remember. But they're there nonetheless. And we know what we're dealing with as a result. So I'm basically content to stick with Brace for Impact until I get within firing range. And I'm kind of happy to just boost with this Apocalypse, mainly so it can keep in front of my cruisers. Since this thing is supposed to draw a lot of fire early on, and then when the Armageddons get aggressive with their torpedoes and ramming, then they miss out ideally on their opportunity to focus down the Apocalypse. I just couldn't tell you how to effectively get some damage in while using a Nova Can without a micro warp jump though. That I haven't quite figured out. It's just if the situation allows for it, basically. And it has had some good luck with that said. Otherwise, I'm keeping this frigate in the asteroid belt, or at least near the asteroids, so otherwise I can prepare for the Vanguards that are going to be showing up. I know they're likely going to grab the objective. I just don't know when. Hell, part of me gets a little bit paranoid that they're going to circle around and try and flank me too. So I'm trying to be careful about this positioning a little bit. And I'm going to regret going through this little narrow choke point, because when I do see the Vanguards, I'm going to see that they're going to be pushing up towards me. And what gives that away? The fighters being recalled, essentially. I'm going to know they're flying towards me because that is the indication I need it. And since these Vanguards actually go faster than my Falchion right now, I would rather not get this thing run down by a couple of Vanguard, if I can so help it. And also during this time we did kind of hear a couple of scanner pulses, which thankfully are doing no value. They just have enough frigates to kind of be able to chain them off effectively, with really no downtime, I would argue at least. But if you pay close attention, you can see my opponent slowly backing off with the frigates, and they already backed off quite a bit with the battleship. They are not content to come to me, but at the same time they're not revealing me either to benefit from the range. But I see the Vanguards, I know where they're going, and I'm suspecting that they're going to try and flank me, grab the points behind me as I push forward, so
Ship ready.
Instead, I'm going to move directly to the middle point, and hopefully that will allow me to shoot these things when I get within range, or if they do try to circle around the wreckage or the asteroids. That is kind of the plan. And ideally, get a little bit of damage as a bonus here.
Your orders?
It does reveal my frigate's result because it prompted them to scan as well, but so far this frigate should be perfectly safe. There's not really a lot of lance fire, a lot of weaponry hitting it, and it's already kind of behind my fleet as is. And the bombers sure as hell aren't going to do anything. If anything, they're just going to get picked off by my dictator's fighters right now. So that's a couple easy fighters gotten rid of. I think that's the battle barge's fighters right up top there. So they might still win that battle, even though I'm kind of not doing a good job paying attention to it, as far as preserving my charges. My main concern is these vanguards, is really what it comes down to. I don't want objectives being stolen behind me, because the battleship can steal objectives pretty much as well as I can right now, if it's in the proper positioning for it. And they do have the micro-warp jump on that battle barge too, which is a lot of the factor of how they can grab points on me really quickly. If you watched my recent battle with the crew war spears, you've seen the micro-warp jump do a lot of good use there. Otherwise, I'm just taking what free shots I can. The vanguards aren't really all that scary until they decide to commit and try and board me. And my frigates were never picked off to basically allow me to constant vision on these vanguards. And again, I'm going to at least make the attempt to shoot down their deck. But there's the micro-warp jump there, and even though it was a preemptive Nova cannon, it's mainly because it was stuck in the stasis bomb really. But thankfully, I was able to get the damage in, even if most of it was absorbed by the shield. It's still permanent damage that I can work with. And with the lock-on stance, I can continue to pummel it slowly but surely. I'm just, again, very mindful of my objectives possibly being stolen behind me. Thankfully though, my opponent decided to forget that their frigates are not really combat ships, even though I'm doing a terrible job trying to ram with mine. Ram with the cruisers, that is. While we're laying down the hull on this battle barge, the vanguards are just in full retreat, and now I'm ready to make this thing feel miserable. I don't need to tell you how this is going to work out. I missed with the second torpedo salvo sadly, but fire assaults are still good, and I have one Armageddon when I can be bothered to try and run it down some. Hell, even this Falchion I think gets a couple of torpedoes off at some point maybe. I honestly couldn't remember. But, thankfully, with my opponent using so much of the combustion gauge, Battle Barge is going to take a big hit, and I have called arms to at least negate a lot of the boarding here. So I'm not worried. I am not worried in the slightest. I just want to kill this flagship before it can do any serious damage to me. Especially since I'm busy trying to run down these vanguards at the same time. And even that torpedo salvo wasn't the best. I could have gotten a nice solid hit in there, but with the ram, 3 fire assaults should be enough to kill this battle barge. I'm just going to use the Apocalypse to kind of seal the deal a little bit. So the flagship is basically gone. My crew is still in incredible shape, and their vanguards are getting heavily crippled. 2 of their decks is gone, so they're just going to be, well, I was going to say I could deal with them, pick them off really easily, but they're already picked off. And I believe there's only one other vanguard left to deal with, outside this one here. I just could be wrong. My opponent concedes either way. It was brutal. It was an interesting type of battle, since I'm dealing with the unknown positioning of the Vanguards. And I tried to position myself in a way to take advantage of if they try to backstab me or steal points behind me. I at least have the range to do some good damage to them. Okay, match number 4 to end off of this Space Marine run, hopefully. And oddly enough, I'm getting this dang, Raven Guard Space Marine player love yet again. But they still mixed up their fleet. It's going to be a different type of fleet altogether. Although, I don't quite understand what their obsession is with the carrier type of strike cruisers, since they are utilizing 5 of those strike cruisers this time, as opposed to like the lances or the boarding torpedoes. And maybe I'm just biased because I enjoy the play that torpedoes have on the game, never mind the sudden impact if you can use them well. But I feel like the torpedoes are just better than at least the carrier Thunderhawks or strike cruisers, just because of how much more cheaper they are. They're a lot more impactful, as I said, but definitely take a lot more control. That is the catch there, but at least a lot of that can be alleviated with the boarding torpedoes tracking the tracking component on the boarding torpedoes. Especially if you have 1, maybe 2 strike cruisers that have at least some fighter base that kind of screen and take the point defense shots for you. Either way, we kind of got a sense of what this is. I was at first wondering if maybe it was 6 cruisers, which would have been a nice treat to go up against, but it's not. The fighters give it away. We're dealing with 5 strike cruisers. And we can say that for certain because of the number of silhouettes we're seeing for these fighters. So this is where the brace for impact comes in. I don't have to worry about torpedoes of any kind though, at least. So now it's just a matter of mitigating a lot of the damage that they could do, which mainly is to my point defense. That should not be underestimated. If I get complacent and let them shoot down my point defense, then it's going to take an eternity for me to recover them, since the emergency repair only allows me to repair 3 point defense at a time. And that's going to be a slow process, let alone a fatal one, especially for something like a battleship that doesn't really have the speed, let alone mobility, to evade them easily. But that's what the Dictator's for. It's matches like these that single-handedly justify why I have a Dictator in this fleet. And for when the Dictator fails me in certain situations, that's where torpedoes kind of bait the fighters away to mitigate that damage. So it's working out really well. And hell, I may even hit one of them with the Falchion. With the Falchion's torpedo, no less. And again, the Novacan here is supposed to attempt them to boost away, since they are right next to a gas cloud. So I don't have the best convenience to shoot them, even if I were to go in lock-on stance, which I'm considering doing next moment. Thankfully for them, the shields absorb almost all that damage this time around. So I'm not getting some free damage outside the lance follow-up that I'm getting.
Maximum burn.
And conveniently for me, the bombers are going after the Falchion. And with no scanner pulses, no frigates, it's easy enough to deny them. And even then I have a gas cloud, should I need to protect my cruisers any. And so far this is a promising start. The Novacan may not have done damage, but the follow-up lances allowed a permanent engine destruction on that strike cruiser. This is not going to be pretty for this fleet if this keeps up. Otherwise, I'm just keeping an eye out for frigates, because there was something that grabbed an objective up top. And I'm trying to get what damage in I can. Since again, even though I did cripple their engine, the dang ships are in a gas cloud and I'm going to have a hard time hitting them at range. So the best thing I can ask for is to just punish them for hugging the gas cloud. And as you can see, that's going to work out perfectly. It prompted such a nice over-response there. The flagship's visible, the other cruiser got hit by a Nova cannon, and keep in mind there was another strike cruiser that lost its engine in there. It may not have took a lot of hull damage, but it did lose its shields again. And now I go in for the killing blow. This is not going to be pretty, I can tell you right now. Sadly, my torpedoes are not as true as I would like with the second cruiser. But it's doing its thing. With the ram, that thing's getting massacred. It's just a question of how would I fare if it was 6 cruisers with the torpedoes or even the lances. Because at least the strike cruisers with lances could fight me decently at range. Only problem is they can't run away and benefit off said lances if they're worried about me getting aggressive. Especially with the potential these torpedoes can do. Another strike cruiser temporarily lost his engines. Everything is basically on fire. Doing a terrible job killing this one cruiser on the right, which is why I kamikaze the Falcon into it. And we notice the one frigate that sadly has been left here to not really do anything. The one time they have a frigate. Although they didn't really need it, to be fair, with the amount of vision they could get with the carrier ships. It's just a matter now of cleaning up these crippled ships, and that's what the melted torpedoes are going to do. Surprisingly, that didn't do nearly as much damage as it could have. Mainly because they weren't actually melted torpedoes, I'm realizing. It's going to take a little bit more work with that said, since surprisingly that one torpedo salvo did get foiled quite heavily. Since it did almost no damage on the one cruiser I tried ramming first. And I'm trying to have some fun with this frigate to kill off their frigate in the downtime. But 4 Space Marine matches, 4 solved victories. I just sadly mistimed this charge attempt for my torpedoes to connect, sadly. And my opponent concedes. I think this is part of the reason why, I suppose, I don't do the multiple matches with the same opponent. Since it can seem like when I'm winning, I start to dominate them a little bit more, even with the different type of fleet compositions. Although, my second match with Love was probably the closest one of all 3 of those. It's just a question of if that third and final cruiser were to join the fleet sooner, as opposed to being isolated like it was. Maybe then it would have been a really intense battle, or down to the wire at least.